Welcome to chat night, we bring you good vibe, we shine on the light. Welcome to chat night, we bring you good vibe, we shine on the light. We all over the world, chat night Africa. We all over the world, chat night Africa. Welcome to chat night, we bring you good vibe, we shine on the light. Welcome to chat night, we bring you good vibe, we shine on the light. We all over the world, chat night Africa. We all over the world, chat night Africa. Welcome to chat night, the only place that we give you good vibes. Chat night Africa. Welcome to chat night, all over the world we are shining the light. Chat night Africa. Welcome to chat night.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Voices of Africa on Chat Night. Chat Night Africa. My name is Divine Chamukong, and I'm anchoring this broadcast from Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Listen, if I ask you why are cities across the world witnessing an unprecedented spike in violent crimes by young adults and preteens, what would be your answer? Carjacking, rape, murder, armed robbery, etc., etc. Pay attention, please, especially if you are a parent or intend to be one. Our focus today is on the uptick of violent crimes by adolescents in a world now a global village. And in order to enrich the broadcast with different perspectives, we invited powerful speakers, a panel of 4. The Reverend Dr. Abraham Aki in South Africa. He has been a prisons chaplain for many, many years. Ms. Fatmata Bari, a renowned attorney and community advocate in the Washington, D.C. metropolis. Mrs. Valerie Kaba-Awa, a licensed clinical social worker in Washington, D.C. And Ms. Monica Hutchinson, Policy Director, Rise for Youth and Vice President for Government Relations for Women of Color Coalition. Once again, I want to thank all of you for accepting my invitation. We are about to have a jaunty conversation in a topic that's disturbing for many in towns, cities, villages across the world. My first question is going to go to Miss Monica Hutchinson. And Monica, again, thank you. This is the first time you are taking part on this beautiful platform called Chat Night Africa. Your voice is not coming across. You may have to check why. Please, you may have to. Yes, I think I hear you now. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. No, I was just saying thank you for inviting me.
The first question I have for you, what accounts for the proliferation of violent crimes by preteens and teenagers?
So let me just so that is a loaded question.
Yes, go ahead.
So there's a lot of different things that underlying issues that lead to the uptick in our youth and violence from economic injustice, right? When we talk about our young people and their families, one, ensuring that our young people and their families are able to live in safe, supportive environments is one of the biggest things, right? Ensuring that parents are able to actually be able to afford to spend time with their young people, to be home, not have to work 2-3 jobs, to make sure that schools have relevant information that they're teaching our young people, and that there is after school programming for our young people, that there is opportunities for our young people, opportunities for them to learn in many different ways. And so at the end of the day, most of our young people get in trouble for things that are related to an issue of lack, right? A lack of something, lack of quality housing, lack of economic opportunities, lack of quality education. It's dealing with this systemic issue of lack is what the overwhelming majority of crimes that our young people are committing. And so if we start addressing those things and start addressing the root causes, then we can help eradicate.
I can imagine what economic injustice would do. Parents can provide for their children the kind of care they would love to. I was reading on the BBC a news report in one African country where youths are dying because they take drugs due to the fact that they're overwhelmed with life's circumstances. But here in the United States, I've seen people children in affluent homes involved in violent crimes. So how does economic injustice explain a situation like this?
Mm-hmm. Well, so when we're talking about young people that come from affluent families, that doesn't mean that those families aren't filled with trauma either, right? And so trauma looks different to different people. And so for some of our young people and for some of those families, like I said, not having a positive outlook, or I'm sorry, not outlook, but a positive outlet for our young people, that is one of the biggest factors as to why young people are getting in trouble. When the kids are out of school, the hours between 3 to 6, that is when our young people are the most vulnerable and can fall into a kind of like under the spell of negative forces, right? So ensuring that our young people have got things to do after school, they've got mentorship, they have all of these other things that can fill up their time, would absolutely help to ensure they have positive influences in their life and not negative ones. And then we can't deny the fact that social media is also playing a role, right? And so that's a piece of the puzzle. Sometimes crime looks fun, and we have to make sure that we're just having conversations with our young people to see what's going on, to see where they're at, and just simply ask them like why, did you do this, right? What is going on? And then we also know that this is an issue with some of our affluent young people that has been going on for a long time. When they want to get the attention of their parents, they act out, right? When their parents are ignoring them, they act out because the more they act out, the bigger the issue, or the bigger their cry, hoping that somebody pays attention to them.
Monica, when a lot of people witness the spike in violent crimes, the tendency is to blame it on parents. Any inaccuracies in this perception?
So yeah, that is the tendency. Now don't get me wrong, some parents absolutely, the fault lies with some parents, right? We just saw what just happened in Michigan with the mother and father who provided their son with a gun, who ended up going and killed some of his classmates. But for the most part, parents are seriously just trying to survive. And so when we talk about, oh, everything starts at home, things start at home, you're absolutely right. Things do start at home. But like I said, when a family is literally trying to survive, right? When a young person gets in trouble and they're suspended and they're sent home, when this country does not have access to paid family and medical leave, right? So when schools suspend a child and the child goes home and the parents have to work, that child is now left unsupervised. And so, ensuring that society is also supporting our families and lifting up our families and empowering our families is extremely important. And some of these things people don't think about, like I said, paid family and medical leave is one of the biggest ways that we can ensure that parents are home and can be there to correct behavior in the very beginning. But anybody that has kids know that we're not with our kids 24/7, and by the time our kids hit that preteen age, we are no longer the biggest factor in their lives, right? Their friends are and outside influences. So as a whole, society has to take a serious look in the mirror, and if we don't like what's going on with our young people, then we need to start asking ourselves, what behavior are we showing them that they're patterning?
That is Lady Monica Hutchinson. Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching Voices of Africa on Chat Night Africa. I'm going to invite the lawyer who is on the panel today to give us some perspectives on what's going on. Lawyer Fatmata, thank you for coming to take some questions today on this very troubling issue.
No problem. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you for having me.
Recently, Washington, D.C. passed legislation toughening the law punishment on violent criminals. Is the problem that we have, is the problem because we don't have tough laws enough? Are the laws just too merciful that young people say, you know what, I don't care. I can go carjack somebody, rape somebody, murder somebody. After I just have a lenient sentence. Would legislation solve the problem? Is it even the problem?
Okay, so here's some of my problem with some of these legislations, and even the title and the basically this idea that crime globally for the youth is just skyrocketing. That's not true. The media portrayal says it's skyrocketing, but the reality is not that. Okay, if you go to the WHO, the World Health Organization, if you go to their website, you will find that according to them, the youth crimes have not actually been going up, like the violent crimes that everyone is so afraid of. Nobody's saying these acts are not happening, but the idea that globally the crime committed by youth is just so exponential that we need to now put in policies to, like a friend of mine said, cage children, is an overreaction in many ways. Mainly because it almost reminds me of when we were having these crime waves here in the US, and they put these 3 strikes and you're out laws, and these laws that created a system where we now have overrepresentation of Black people, although we've always had it, but it became even worse in our prison system. And I feel like we're going back to that. And the report basically said that young people are more likely to be victims than be the victimizer when it comes to violent crimes. And majority of the violent crimes are by adults, not children. But we are, these things are happening, and everybody understandably wants a solution. But I think to some degree, we're being lazy. We're being lazy with these legislations. We have one here in Maryland that's going through the system. DC just did theirs, and around the country, there are these policies that are being put in place. But I think we're being lazy. We're not taking the time to really think through, one, what is causing some of these behaviors, two, to talk to the public who are impacted negatively by these acts by these young people, and to really make sure that they understand. It may seem as if the numbers are ticking up, but the documentation shows otherwise. Even here in Maryland, there's a report by the Department of Juvenile Justice here in the state of Maryland that said that in 2021, adults represented 93% of homicide arrests. So we have to put things in perspective and realize that over the last decade, the numbers have been going down for youth, not going up, and they're lower than they were pre-pandemic. Do you understand? So it's like during the pandemic, things were happening. We all know why. But we didn't really put anything in place to impact everything that these young people went through during the pandemic. Some children, this is the first time that they're in a regular classroom for many of our kids because of the pandemic. And we don't have resources in place to impact that. So,
I do understand when you talk about statistics, but somebody in Washington, D.C., somebody in Detroit, somebody in south side of Chicago, somebody in Philly, somebody in Baltimore wouldn't care about statistics because they're living at some point. I was following the news in D.C. and police were advising people to drive in the middle lane to avoid being hijacked. So how are you going to convince residents of Washington, D.C. that crime is not spiking?
So it's not so much to convince them that crime is not spiking. As I said, it's lawmakers who take the time, and people within, not just the government, but in situations where they have access to resources and impacting policy, to take the time to actually address the issues that result in this. Like what Monica said earlier, right? Many times we know the root cause, but we don't want to address the root cause. We go directly to, let's put them all in jail. And we know historically that hasn't helped. The United States of America incarcerates more people than almost anyone in the world. And yet our crime rates are not exactly lower than the rest of the world. Do you understand? So incarceration is not necessarily the cure to the problem. And I understand, I grew up in neighborhoods where you have drive-by shootings. So sometimes, like, if I don't understand what people are worried about and concerned about. But let's be realistic. Even in Maryland, here in Maryland, you talk about Baltimore, I just read to you the numbers. 90% of the violent crimes are conducted by adults, not children. But now we have a law that could conceivably have children as young as 10 years old to be held and imprisoned.
The legislation in DC that toughens punishments for juvenile offenders. Do you think that lawmakers were overreacting?
I think around the country, we are, as far as the DC law, I can't speak too much into it because I did not take a fine tooth comb to go over it. What I do know is that it's pretty similar to what is going through the legislature here. And I don't want to say they're overreacting, mainly because I haven't taken enough time to go over it and discuss it with other people. What I can tell you is we've had a history of rising crime, and the result was exactly this: put in stricter policies. And at the end of the day, historically, it didn't necessarily impact the crime itself. What it did do was have a lot of Black people, Black men incarcerated. And at the end of the day, the people who put the policies in place later regretted what they've done. And I feel like we're going backwards instead of forward. And we're not addressing the thing that is resulting in that. When we look at even rising crime, whether it's youth or not youth, many times it's linked to economy. I'm not saying that poor people are criminals, poor people are violent. What I'm saying is a lot of times the result of low economy causes higher acts of criminal activities. And so do we address the cause, or do we just continue to go this route that we're going? And I am not a proponent of not holding people accountable. Far from it.
Definitely, you're a lawyer. You
Far from it. I am a lawyer. Exactly. I'm not for not holding people accountable. Far from it. But I do think that we need to take a step back, take a deep breath, and really look at what the issues are and address those issues that are causing this to happen.
Before I bring the Reverend Doctor from South Africa, Reverend Dr. Aki Abraham, the last question for you, Fatmata, lawyer Fatmata. There is this contentious debate about whether there should be police officers in schools. What's your opinion about it? Some are for, against it. Some are for, and some are against it. So what should school jurisdictions do, or school districts do?
So here in our jurisdiction, we had what's called school resource officers, SROs.
A nicer word for police officers?
Now they have CEOs. Here's the thing. Ideologically, or if you think about it, it sounds like a good idea. But here are the facts. With police in schools, the people most impacted are Black children, and then brown children, and children with disabilities. they are more impacted negatively than any other group. And at the end of the day, you don't find that these children are more criminal minded, but there's a certain bias in how these things are done. And we've seen how the numbers are, right? I can only speak to the statistical numbers because I don't have children in schools, right? But when you look at the numbers, some of the things that these Black and brown children are being taken out of the classroom for by officers is she has an attitude. She won't move. Not she's violent, not she brought a gun, not she brought marijuana, but there is evidence that their white counterparts, if police is involved, is because they actually committed a crime, like they brought drugs in school, they actually did something. So when you look at the disparities, it's not a positive thing for Black and brown and children with disabilities, because I'm a special ed attorney, disability advocate. So for me, these groups of children matter to me. And I've worked with them almost my entire adult life since I was in my 20s. And now I'm in my 50s. So for the past 30 years, these children have been, they don't have a voice. So somebody needs to amplify them. And I think the numbers show that it's not good for them at the end of the day. And so the same way you can call the police to come into the school if something happens, or come to your house, they can call them to come instead of them being in the school. But that's just my personal opinion as an attorney and as a special education attorney and advocate. And one last thing, you will find that, in fact, the children who, when police officers are in schools, I'm not saying necessarily it's the law enforcement, the school leans heavily on them. Like the school now, instead of just implementing the regular school, instead of the teachers or whoever, they lean on the police officers because they're there. So they're like, come get this kid out, instead of just doing what you normally would do if no officer is not in school.
Attorney Fatmata Barry. You are watching Voices of Africa. And actually, before I go down to South Africa, where there's powerlessness, there's no electricity, but we'll try to get the best image we can of the Reverend Dr. Aki Abraham. Fatmata just said something which sounded to me like racial profiling by resource officers. We'll get to that. But let me bring up at this point Monica Hutchinson, who herself is African American, to react to the questions or to respond to the question I have now. Monica, would you be for or against having police officers in our schools?
So I will say this, that when we talk to our young people about police in the schools, for the most part, our kids, especially our Black and brown students, they honestly don't want them in the schools. It's one of those things. As a parent, I say, if you tell me that the police are in the schools to keep our kids safe, to keep the school safe from outside forces, then why are the police officers not outside the school? Why do you have them inside the school, right? And so, it's to answer that question, like I said, I would urge everybody to sit down with their kids and sit down with students and have this real honest conversation with them, to ask them, do they want police in the schools, and how do they feel about the police in the schools?
Come on, but Monica, if you ask me if I want police officers on the highway, I say no. Nobody wants them around. How much more of kids?
Right. But what I'm saying is that this question, and the only reason I'm saying this to you, because I actually have had this conversation with young people, right?
Okay.
And some of our young people say, no, I don't want police at all in the schools. None. I don't want to see them, not never. And then
do they give reasons for that?
Yeah, because in some of our schools and some of the police officers are bad. I mean, like they do profile, right? They treat them really bad. They treat our students as if they're criminals. You know, whatever happens, they're just there, right? Like they're there to criminalize it. And I live in Virginia, and so in Virginia, the SROs, the police officers in the schools, are never supposed to be involved when it comes to disciplinary actions. The problem is that not all school districts actually follow that. They will pull police officers in for when a student breaks the code of conduct. That is not something that a police officer is supposed to be involved in. They are only supposed to be involved if it is something that the child is being accused of breaking the law. Breaking code of conduct is not the same as breaking the law, right?
Well, but school superintendents, teachers, and some parents would say, hey, look, if you look at the mass shootings in schools, sometimes kids bringing guns to schools,
Hmm.
it just sounds like the thing to do to deter that kind of action.
So I would just say that at every school where there has been a school shooting, sadly, police were in the school, right? In Marjorie, what was it the school in Florida? There was a police officer there. He ran away. He fled, right? Look at Uvalde. You had a whole hallway full of them jokers, tactical gear. They had the same gun as the gunman, and they never went in. They were standing there scared while they left innocent babies to be in there with one gunman, right? So more police in a school does not make our kids more safe. It just doesn't, right? And Uvalde should be the exclamation point on that whole statement. But, at the end of the day, I agree that I don't want anything to happen to my kids either when they're in school. But once again, if the purpose of a police officer in the school is to protect the kids in the school from an outside threat, then it makes more sense to have the officer outside the school, not inside the school, right?
Let me make sure I get you clear on this. Does the presence of police officers in school criminalize children or deters crime or
It does
deter
not.
crime?
No, doesn't deter crime, but it will. If anything, it criminalizes our young people.
Your point taken. You are watching Voices of Africa. Very good. At this point, we will take a flight to South Africa to meet the Reverend Dr. Aki Abraham, and we have some pointed questions for him. Now, excuse the pitch darkness. I've just been told that there isn't electricity in the city where he is in South Africa, but at least we can see a bit of his face, but more importantly, hear what he has to say. Reverend Dr. Aki Abraham, scripture says, and I quote, train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. I'm reading from Proverbs 22:6. That seems to be pointing a prosecutorial finger at the parents that they just have taken their feet off the gas pedal of the car, and then children just doing whatever they want. Is this happening? And I know you're in South Africa. There's a lot of crimes in South Africa, young people also involved. Is it because parents have become irresponsible, or they don't just know what to do? Yes, just hold on, please. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you for having me on board. When Solomon talked about parents should train up their children in the way they should go, he examined the society of his day. He discovered that there were parents who were full of wisdom and knowledge. He saw what was happening in his community, that the parents took time to groom the children, to nurture the children, and to mentor the children, give them right attitude, right values. And so he could come to the conclusion, looking at the environment where I live and what I see parents doing, if children will listen to the wisdom of their parents, listen to the value the parents are putting into their lives, they will receive so much that in the end will make them better people in society. Now, moving away from that society where Solomon lived, our society is not so much like the society that Solomon lived in. Parents are coming from different backgrounds, from different walks of life, and families do differ. There are families that are deeply rooted in moral values, values of integrity, that they take time to nurture their children, groom their children, and tell the children, go left, go right, you will find real and quality life. And these children who have grown up in that kind of culture, in that kind of environment, and in that kind of home, they grow up listening to their parents, listening to their mothers, and following the commandments of the scripture that says, honor your father and your mother, so your days will be long on the face of the earth. They know that when they get the wisdom from their parents, when they get good values from their parents, they will live a long time on the face of the earth. They will be very successful. But there are other homes where parents lack even moral values, values of integrity, values of wisdom and knowledge. The children grow up wanting to get something from their fathers, wanting to get something from their mothers, and the mothers are not living up to expectation. The parents are not living up to expectation.
You are watching Voices of Africa, and on the screen is the Reverend Dr. Abki Abraham. He's connecting from South Africa, and we will bring him back on the platform. Apparently, he has connectivity problems, coupled with the fact that there isn't electricity in South Africa. But we will bring him. Reverend Dr. Aki, please. Yeah, okay. It looks like you're back. Reverend Dr. Aki again. Continue, sir.
Yes, so I'm saying that there are parents who do their work, like Solomon would say, train the children, nurture the children, mentor them, give them words of wisdom that will follow them in life, and they follow these words and they become better people in society. There are also some other children in the family where you can say all that you want to say. It will be like throwing water on a duck's back. They go to school, they live in the community, they see the things that are happening in the community, they hear from their peers and they learn from their peers what the mother is saying, what the father is saying. They are not taking it with a pinch of salt. And so it's a very controversial situation. While we may blame the children at the parents at one point, there's also the situation where we blame children after the parents have done their very best. We grew up seeing parents who invested a lot in their children, and the children misused the investment and became a social misfit, became dropped out from school after all the investment that the parents put into them. And there are also some parents who have not really been able to live up to what society expects of them. And so you see them producing children who cannot really be of help to the society and of help to the community.
Dr. Aki, Proverbs 13:24. I'm going to ask you this question and I'll bring up the social worker, Mrs. Awa. Proverbs 13:24 says, he who spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. Let me take the case of children of pastors like you. Some have gone wild, out of control. So, were the parents, pastors, clergymen, sparing the rod and spoiling the child? That's where you should expect the best caliber of children. Do you get my question? All right. We will come back to you to answer that question. Time for us to bring up the social worker, Mrs. Valerie Kaba Awa. Yeah, we'll bring you on. We'll bring you on, Reverend Aki. We'll bring you on in platform. Hold on, we'll bring you on to answer the question I just asked you. You had some connectivity issues there. This is Mrs. Awa. Mrs. Awa, you work in Washington, D.C. Some people, rightly or wrongly, now describe Washington, D.C. as the epicenter of juvenile violent crimes in the United States. You deal with families who are going through all kinds of trauma. What is happening? Are parents taking the responsibility? And I ask you this question because typically when people see crimes spike, or as the lawyer argues, it's not spiking, but people are being hijacked, people are being raped, murder, all kinds of things. And sometimes, surprisingly, shockingly, by children as at the age of 9. It just leaves you wondering. So the tendency for people is to ask the question, are parents really in the lives of the 9-year-old girl who goes out with a gun or to hijack somebody? What are your experiences in Washington, D.C.?
Thank you so much, Dr. Chamukon, for having me on this platform. This is a very, very interesting topic. As a social worker, I think we it is very good that we have platforms like these, to raise awareness on issues that concerns our young people. Um, I've been working in DC as a social worker for about 9 years today, and I have dealt with a lot of young people, a lot of youth who are having challenging behaviors or who are being defiant. To talk about the courses, I would say it's a combination of a lot of things. And some of the speakers have already touched base on some of the topics, like the economic situation, which actually impacts our family structures. There is social media as well, which actually put the young people to be under pressure on trying to, seek validation or trying to belong. But in most cases, I think a lot of young people suffer from trauma. In my case, in the families that I've worked with, they suffer from trauma, generational trauma that has not been dealt with and is being transferred, to the other generation. And the young people are suffering. And there is lack of parental, should I say, parental supervision as well, because of the economic structure that we have. You know, Parents are struggling to make ends meet, and I heard one of, I think is lawyer Fatimata said, we do not have, parents are not being provided with family leave where they can spend time with the young children and all that. All those, I would say, contribute to the young people, disconnecting from the real world, and just trying to find who they are. They don't know who they are, so they are just struggling. And if the parents themselves need support and they are not getting the support, the result is going to be what we are having today. So when it comes to the juvenile system, I would say um, criminalizing our young people, it's not the ideal. Or trying to say we want police or law enforcement in our schools, I wouldn't agree with that. Even though it could be a good situation if the kids will understand why. But again, we are dealing with a very challenging society, or population. So for me, I would say having more social workers or counselors in school in place of police law enforcement officers would be ideal, because these young people needs to be talked to. You have to educate them or raise the awareness on issues that are going on in the society, especially social media.
Now, just hold your thought there. We have somebody on the line. Hello, Mrs. Mercy Kemmer. Hello, just hang on. Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, I should go ahead?
Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, okay. So thank you so much for having me on your show today. And it's a privilege to be here. So the topic is, the rise of violent crimes by teenagers in cities across the world. So when you called me about this topic, I was excited because I work with kids that come from various backgrounds and that go through this. I work in a mental health institution with children, teenagers, and one of the reasons that I think that is a contribution to this stems from parenting. There are so many kids that end up in this institution because there's no structure in the home. There is no parenting. There is no strict rules and regulation for kids to follow. A lot of these children, like I heard the other speaker just said, a lot of them is trauma from home. based on where they're coming from and seeing violence in the home. That's why sometimes when I speak to people, I always say, whatever you do in the home as a married couple or as a parent, it's not just for you, it's for your children as well. Sometimes it comes from that, the violence in the home, the kids grows around violence and tends to think that that is the only way. To them, that's normal. So they translate the violence to the environment and it becomes a lifestyle. And then the advent of social media has made it worse. Let's say a kid that has been in a home with a structured parenting kind of style, get their hands on social media and the influence of it, it has contributed to a lot. A lot of kids, there's no regulation on social media, so they can get on social media, they can see the violent crimes, they can. Some parents do not actually watch what their kids watch. They don't take care of it. You have children getting on social media, getting on with gang groups, giving them instructions on what to do, and making the case worse. We have children that are of the Gen Z population that are being parented by some of their grandparents that are baby boomers. These are people that do not know anything about social media, and it becomes a problem. So I think social media and parenting is one of they are the most contributing factors to the violence that we see among teenagers in cities across the world.
Mrs. Kemmer, you are of African descent like me.
Yeah.
Apparently, Africans are taking on responsibilities they cannot conveniently afford. I give you an example. Mom and dad are not home because they took
Right.
a $700,000, $800,000 house. They have a Lexus, the latest model of Lexus, parked at the front there. They have 250 channels of cable TV. Nobody's home, and they brought mama from the village, from Cameroon. She's old, she cannot control. So I'm going to ask this question to the other panelists. Aren't parents actually the reason for some of these things are happening, because they seem to be biting more than they can chew?
Yes.
Okay. Very, very true.
Yes, go ahead, Mrs. Kemmer. I know you have to rush off and pick up the kids.
Yes. So that is one of the things when it comes to us as Africans, as people, as immigrants. This is one of the things. And let me expand this to say a lot of this comes from competition amongst ourselves. Everybody want to be in the forefront. You want to bite more than you can chew, like you said. You want people to see you like you're living high and mighty and not considering that you're raising a family. I've always told people, live within your means. The greatest asset in life are your children. Stay home for your children. Whatever car you drive is nobody's business. Whatever kind of house you live in is nobody's business. The most important thing is instilling some morals in your children to be able to be there, present, so that in the future your kids don't live out of trauma. Be present for your children. Live the lifestyle of trying to meet up with people, trying to meet up with the Joneses. Be there. There is no point of even having a $1 million home and you can't even stay in the house for a night. It doesn't make sense. And these children tend to suffer. When it comes to children, it's not just about a financial provision, but it's also how we instill morals in our children. So I think that this is very rampant in our African society, that people tend to take all these big things and then they forget to raise their children. Before you know, the internet is raising your children for you. Your neighbors are raising your children for you. Influence from peer pressures raising your children. The schools are raising your children. Remember, not all the rules and regulation at schools favor you. So you have all these things raising your children, but you, because you're more focused on meeting the extra needs that you don't need.
Right.
That is strong.
Very, very strong. And
I'm going to have Sister Monica Hutchinson respond to you when I bring her up on the stage on the platform. I'll also have Fatmata. She's indicating that she has something to say. Do you have anything to add before you go? I know again you have to go pick up the kids.
Yeah, I'm sorry I have to go, but thank you so much, Nee, for having me. What I can say to our our community, diasporans, Africans in particular, is that live within your means. Consider your children as the greatest asset. When you invest in your children, it will turn around and come back to you. You don't have, especially to mothers like me that have younger children, parents like me with younger children, you don't have to compete with those who have grown-up children. Those who have grown-up children can go for days, their children are grown and they're gone. But if you have little children that need you at home, need those morals, need some things to be instilled in them, please stay home and stop the competition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Kema. I said this content would likely be spicy, and I think we're getting into the marrow of it. I can see everybody wants to react to, but since you're on the platform, I'm going to bring even Reverend Dr. Aki to complete his thoughts. Then I'll bring the other participants. They definitely have a lot of things. I see Pastor John Sama too on the line. Please, Pastor John Sama, hold on. I will bring you into stream. Yes, what's your reaction to what Mrs. Kema just said? You are an immigrant like other immigrants who are watching and will watch later on. What's your reaction to what she said?
You're talking to me?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah. No, she just nailed it, because I was still, to come to that aspect. And one more thing that I really want to throw emphasis on is our family structures. Family structures is causing a lot of damages to our young people, especially, just to add to what she said, especially those families where both parents are working full time, long hours with all the assets and facilities that they've, put around for themselves. We don't have time for our children. These kids need us. You have to be in tune to their needs. Know what is happening to them in school. Know what they are watching. If you're not there at home, how would you, know what your child watches on a daily basis? So I think
you are a social worker. Have you been to certain homes and you feel that the parents can be there but aren't there?
Of course. That's why we have a lot of kids who are in the foster system, and it's not helping, because I've worked with a lot of foster parents. So like I said from the very beginning, this problem is a combination of, variables. It's a combination of issues like our system, the foster care system. They think they are doing good to the kids, but they are not, because we have foster parents who are not working for the best interest of the children. They are just there to make money, because when you have a foster child in your home, the government gives you like monthly salaries, to take care of the kids. They do not, in my experience, they do not, because when we're working with the families, we're also working with the foster parents. So I would say the government as well is not doing justice to these kids. So the root cause would be the foundation of the children, which is the family. How we nurture our children matters a lot. We have a lot of divorce cases. It is so rampant in our immigrant families, especially from us who come from Cameroon. If you ask, the number of divorce rates in our society is so high. Parents tend not to make sacrifices for their children. We owe these children a lot. They don't owe us anything.
I met my daughter. I went to visit my granddaughter in Texas, and this is what she told me. She said, and panelists, listen. She said, Dad, if you think there's drama in DMV, come to Texas.
Wow.
Come to Texas.
It is all over the place. I think when we come over, we tend to forget our values that our parents instilled in us. We tend to neglect the importance of family. Back in Africa, in our countries, some of us are products today based on the sacrifices our parents made. Our mothers especially, they made a huge sacrifice. No matter how challenging the family structure is, or worse, they stood there to raise their kids. And that is one thing we lack. We have blended families, a lot of blended families in our communities. How are we raising these children? For a child to be existing in a blended family, that's a lot of confusion already for the child. And if we don't have these step parents who might be so kind enough to see that they have a responsibility to raise the children, then it will be chaotic for the child. So I think we need to come together.
You are watching Voices of Africa. I'll be bringing on Pastor John Summer, but let me bring on Reverend Dr. Aki, and then I bring the lawyer and Lady Hutchinson, Monica Hutchinson. We now have on the platform the Reverend Dr. Aki connecting from South Africa. Again, excuse us, the quality of his image. There isn't electricity in South Africa. What city in South Africa are you in, sir?
Johannesburg.
Johannesburg. Lady Hutchinson was saying that she didn't expect that to be happening in South Africa. I said, my sister, that happens in virtually all African countries. So anyway, I was asking you a question. Yeah, I was asking you a question. And I made references to Proverbs 13:24, and it says, "He who spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him." So I'm going to talk to you, your colleague pastors. Again, I've seen so many children of pastors just going crazy. They just, parents lost control. But these pastors are teaching in the pulpit every Sunday, trying to help other families. So what is the problem? Are they trying to help other families and not helping their own families? Are they sparing the rod and spoiling the children? What is going on, sir?
Actually, they are not sparing the rod and making the children go wayward. They are doing their very best. You see, in many Christian homes and clergy homes also, the pastor gets up every morning, has time with the family to do morning devotion. In the evening, they gather for evening devotion. Sometimes he can be traveling. When he travels, the wife has to follow up with all of that in the family.
You are watching.
It takes the grace of God.
Yes, go ahead.
It takes the grace of God for us. It takes the grace of God for us to raise godly children, Christian children. I was just trying to say a while that you can take a horse to a stream. If the horse has refused to drink water, there's nothing you can do about that horse. There are some pastors' children who have turned up very good, very well composed. They have even become pastors themselves. They listened to the words of their father. They took the wise counsel of their fathers and followed in the footsteps of their fathers and their mothers and became also community builders in their own right. There are some cases where pastors have been traveling. I don't dispute that. They travel and forget about the home, even though they may call from time to time. But they travel sometimes. Some have 6 congregations, 7 congregations. You are virtually traveling from one place. As you come back, you start a repeat journey. The children are left to their mothers, and sometimes the strong hand of discipline that comes from the father is not there. Sometimes the mothers may play around with the children, and then the children turn out to not be the kind of people that they are there. So the work of the clergy is very cumbersome.
It's also the problem is the answer. I know we'll come to preventive measures, but it's also a prevention, more prayers, and possibly maybe praying and maybe praying in tongue. Everybody's laughing.
We all pray to God for leadership, for guidance of our families, and we tell our children, a family that prays together stays together. Children that grow up listening to God and paying attention to God's word and to God's wisdom, they will find success wherever they go. We try to build the church in the home. The church in the home is centered around prayer, the wisdom of God, the knowledge of God. But even there, you also know that Satan likes to visit the household of the pastor. He knows that the pastor is doing a wonderful work in the society. If he cannot get the pastor on the pulpit, you want to get the pastor in his home. Make sure there is a problem between the pastor and the wife and the children.
Being a pastor, you've made yourself a lightning rod. Anyway, go ahead.
So the devil, if he cannot meet the pastor on the pulpit, and pastor is doing his work and winning souls, you say, I will meet the pastor at his family. I will make sure I get into that family and tear that family apart so that what the pastor is doing out there is of no use.
Okay.
What we're doing at home, praying for our wives, for our children, and we leave the rest in the hands of God. There is a time that pastors' children have a meeting. I really remember when I was in Cameroon, there was one of the pastors that they brought together all the pastors' children and said, you know what? Everybody's talk about us and talk about our behavior. It's time we take our duty seriously. People expect so much from us. We've done some despicable things. So it was a talking point for the pastor's children. It was actually a conference that brought together all the, and we were so happy with what happened. Some of us went in there and saw what they were saying. I said, children, you don't need to disgrace your parents. Your parents are carrying the mantle of the gospel. And as they carry the mantle of the gospel, you have to be examples. People want to look at you as the young Jeremiahs, the young Timothys who are coming up, to continue from where your fathers will leave up. So
I will, when I bring you back on the platform, I will be asked Chaplain, you are watching Voices of Africa. You're watching Voices of Africa on Chat Night. When I bring you back, I'll be asking you what your experiences were as prisons chaplain, what those kids were telling you. Time for us now to go to the lawyer, Attorney Fatmata Barry. She has a ton of things to say. I wish I went to law school. I just enjoy watching lawyers talk.
No. It's not too late. It's just 3 years. 3
Okay.
years.
After you, bring on Lady Monica Hutchinson. Now, you heard what an African immigrant said, basically, squarely, laying the blame on the doorsteps of African immigrants who come here, they get things they cannot afford, and then they have to end up working 2 jobs because they have to pay for that. They have 250 channels of television, cable TV in their homes. They're not even home. So how can you say this is not a problem?
Okay. First of all, what we're doing right now is doing what we call tropes, right? We're blaming the parents. I know many parents, like I've been a special education attorney since 2002. And this is what I can tell you. I've worked in Southeast DC, Northeast DC, all these schools, parents who have, parents who do not have, kids that have had issues before going to law school. I worked in residential programming. So I've worked with, I always have the advantage because I've worked with children who have had needs for a very long time. Those who have been diagnosed with ODD, which is a positional defiance disorder, ADHD, you name it, emotional disability, disabilities, autism, you name it, I've worked, whether initially as an advocate, as a working in a residential program, or as counsel for them, or as a special education advocate. This is what I can tell you. Many, many, many parents are not the neglectful parents. The children who may get into issues, their parents are not necessarily neglectful, and they're not necessarily living above their means. There are many parents who are, yes, they're struggling. Yes, they're working 2-3 jobs. Yes, because they got to put food in their mouth, because you have to pay for a 2-bedroom apartment for $2,000 or $3,000. And you're making minimum wage. But you have to have a place for your children to live. You have to feed them. I had parents who used to say to me, getting a little job where they're sweeping hair at the salon, Ms. Berry, I got my job. Ms. Berry, I got my job. Look, I am actually making my own money. And they are proud of making that little bit of money. I think it's always a mistake when we focus and blanketly blame parents. Yes, am I saying that we don't have people who live above their means? Of course we do. We have people living above their means at my level, right? At the upper middle class level. We have people who live above their means in that level. We have people who live above their means at every level. The multimillionaires. You have people who are making millions of dollars and they still live above their means and end up in bankruptcy. You have all these people. What I want us to do is, like I said earlier, take a deep breath, look at the real root cause of some of these issues and try to address those. We should not just throw this thing and say, parents from our community, and yes, we have them. We have people who, we have the, the grass always seems to be greener on the other side, or living as the Joneses, all these things, sayings that we have. I'm not saying they don't exist. What I'm saying is, let's not make the mistake of believing or promoting the idea that our parents who come to this country, that I've never